Welcome back to Pulling Thread. Today, I'm here with my friend Bev talking about a very specific type of grief that most people often overlook, but so many people experience it. This is grieving during and after breakups and divorce. So, we often really associate grief with that. We're going to talk more about ending marriages, breaking up, and how that really carries its own sense of loss that many people do not recognize. And the response to that grief is often great. Divorce is really a loss of a shared life and a life that you thought you were living or going to live, and a future that you thought you were going to have with someone. And it's lived in our imagination, but letting go of it and grieving at whatever we imagine is really difficult. And just like regular grief and death or loss of a loved one or a friend, it's not linear and it comes and goes unexpectedly. And it's a loss of a big part of our identity. So we want to dig in and talk about it and share things that can help and things to say and not to say, and how it affects people emotionally and differently. And then just how to heal and really honor the loss. So I'm going to get started with the basic, and I'm excited to hear what Bev has to contribute to this in terms of breakups. And I'll be contributing in terms of divorce and breakups. So let's dig in. Okay, let's get started. Right. So this is a topic that we really wanted to talk about because it is a little bit different and people don't always see it coming. And I definitely had that experience when I was going through my divorce, where because I was the one who initiated the divorce and I did feel a relief that was finally happening, when I experienced grief throughout the process, it often hit me blind. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't understand it, and it was confusing. Like, why am I grieving this? Or why am I feeling so terrible? And sometimes I would even mistake that for questioning my decision and whether I wanted to go through with the process. And then I would realize, oh no, this is just part of what I need to go through. And it's normal. But I luckily had a therapist and a support system in place to guide me in that direction and help me understand. Divorce can be described as like a living grief, meaning, unlike when someone dies, where there's like finality, divorce gets complicated. And the person you're grieving, the life you're grieving, it's still a possibility in some ways. And the person is still out there. And a lot of times they're out there and they've moved on with another person. And if there are children involved, you still engage with them in a very different way. So you're not just losing a partner. Divorce is not about two people ending a relationship. It's every dream you ever had, all of the plans you have for the future, shared family and friends, which is a whole nother part of the grief. Like, you lose people. Sometimes you even lose your own friends. You often lose a sense of security that comes with being in a long-term relationship. So that applies to marriage and breakups where there isn't marriage. And just the routine and the companionship and the friendship and any role that you had in each other's lives is gone. So it's way more complicated. And often the people around you don't always understand. That's the biggest challenge, is that people will say, you're going to be so better off, so much better off. And this is what you wanted. You
Right.
asked for this. So it's very complicated. You even grieve the person you were in
Mm.
that relationship, and you no longer get to be that person. That can be good and bad. For me, I hated being known as a doctor's wife because I felt like I had my own identity. I didn't want to be seen as someone, a doctor's wife. I wanted to be seen as me. So letting go of that was actually easy. But there were many parts of my life, uh, the sense of security and the friends, like these are people that are still in my life in Facebook world. Uh, his family, we're all still nice and kind to one another, but we're not going on vacations together like we did. And we aren't communicating directly with one another like we did. And so there's a loss. You don't just lose one person, it's a group of people. And it's very complicated. A podcast episode for people going through it and for the people who are supporting someone through it. It can be really difficult as a friend to stand by and watch someone grieving their marriage, especially if it was a really unhappy or toxic or difficult marriage. All you want is them to be happy that they're finally
Mhm.
ending this and getting out of the situation. But there's still going to be a grieving process. And it's important to allow yourself to grieve during a breakup or a divorce, no matter how much better off you think the person is going to be, they still need to go through this. So that's what the things we're going to talk about today and hopefully bring clarity and hope for people who are going through it because the process itself is difficult. Most divorces, even the best ones, are traumatic and difficult. And there is a ton of hope for life on the other side. And I am living proof that life can feel so much better and you can find so much more authenticity and find your way back to yourself when you've been in a relationship that wasn't working. But we still have to go through the grief and we still have to go through the processes. And it, like other grief, it's not linear, it comes and goes in waves. And for me, it was very unexpected.
So I also think it's important to talk about those individuals that are in that limbo space that are maybe dealing with some anticipatory grief where they're deciding, should I get divorced because I know what I'm going to potentially lose here, whether it's my identity, financials, the whole, if you have children involved, my community, my family, my extended family and friends. So this episode is also for those individuals that know that they want a divorce, but just are thinking about the pros and cons and are thinking, is the lemon worth the squeeze? If I divorce, I'm going to have to go through all this stuff and be by myself and start over and change my last name and just the whole thing that comes with it. I'm not coming from a place of experience with marriage. I've never been married, so I am curious. I know you mentioned that you were the one that asked for the divorce. So for those listeners that are in that space, that gray space where they're just like, I don't even know who I am anymore. This marriage is over. We haven't been intimate. We sleep in separate rooms or whatever the thing might be. How did you, for lack of a better term, get to a place where you were like, I'm ripping this band aid off and I'm filing? What was that confirmation for you to do something like to do that, knowing what was going to come with that?
I will say this is such a good point and such a great thing to talk about because the fear of the grief and losing people and losing security and losing your friend, the,
Image.
the fear of how that's going to feel keeps people in relationships that aren't working for a really long time. And that's true for divorce and true for married people and people in relationships. We avoid pain. And if we anticipate that something is going to be very hurtful, we will stay miserable or stay unhappy. for a really long time. And I did that. We did that. Like, we didn't want to go through the process. And I did not want to hurt. I remember my biggest fear was how bad I was going to feel seeing him with someone else, even though we had reached a point where it wasn't working and neither of us were happy a long time before that. The fear of what is it going to feel like? It wasn't the fear of him being with someone else. It was the fear of the pain of feeling like him being with someone else. So I think that's really common for people to stay longer just because it's like the fear of failure, the fear of the pain, the fear of what's it going to feel like?
And you know what?
And
If I may, I also feel like a lot of people stay due to cultural reasons. A lot. I know in the Hispanic communities, there's on other communities like Catholics or whatever the religion is, they don't believe in divorce. So
yes,
it's almost like it's shunned upon. You better stay married. But some people stay because they know it goes against their religion to divorce.
yeah.
And what will their church community think of if that's a big part of your world? What would my parents think? I'm going to let all these people down. It's shameful and just so many reasons why people stay knowing that they don't want to anymore.
Divorce is way more common and acceptable now than it used to be. Like, I remember as a child when my parents got divorced, feeling a lot of shame. I don't think that kids have to feel that because it's so common and so many of their friends' parents are divorced. So it's very almost normal. But there is a fear of what your, if your culture, your family, your church, whatever is going to think. And a societal backlash or feeling judged. Like, there is fear of how you're going to deal with that. Am I going to shut down? Am I going to be able to handle it? This is going to feel bad.
Or look at me
So,
as a failure. Like I couldn't even last as
oh, yeah.
for a husband. Like I just failed in my marriage. You're like, oh, and now they're gonna see me as the loser lawyer that couldn't keep a husband or whatever the thing is.
And I think that there's a fear of never finding anyone. So there's so much fear before. So talking about where people are at when they're in the decision making process is important. It's you're not really at the grieving stage yet. It's time to go. And those I recommend something like a discernment counseling with couples who are in that place because then you're sitting down with a discernment counselor and you're going through where each person is and it's not couples therapy. It do we want to make this work? Can we make this work? And what will it look? How can we go through the process of uncoupling in the healthiest way if it's going to work? What's the next step? Where do we go? That's
But well, ideal if both parties agree. One of the things that I noticed too, this is something that I just noticed because I have a couple of friends that have divorced. There's more divorces than marriages, I think, in the nation at this moment. However, people are still getting married, so there's people still go back for more love. One of the things I notice is that a lot of folks that are in these marriages sometimes one of the parties, whether it's the husband or the wife, is fully in charge of finances. So the other person isn't used to paying whatever the mortgage, the this, the that. I've ran into a couple of folks that once they get separated and get divorced, they're just like, I didn't even know we had another house, or I don't even have access to that bank account, or I don't even know how much the mortgage is, or this and that. And for someone like me, I've never been married and I've never had a partner that would handle all my finances. I know for me, if I was to marry somebody, I would hope that he would be better at budgeting, handle all the bills. But if he handled all the bills for all these amount of years, once we got divorced, if we did, I would be like, whoa, wait a minute. How much is everything? What am I left to pay? Where, like, what stocks, what did we invest in? I don't even know.
that's definitely part of it. And I think back to grief when someone is in the process of the divorce or they've finalized it. Like, it's the financial and the social piece is part of the grieving process. So Some of it's logistics, like what you're describing. Okay, now I have to learn how to do this again. It's been 15 years that someone
Yeah.
else did it and things have changed. And I need to understand what we have and what we don't have and what I'm going to have as a
Exactly.
single person. You have to adjust to co-parenting if you have kids, which is a whole nother, even grieving the time with your children. If you are used to being with them 7 days a week and now you're getting a 50-50 split,
Yeah.
that's a huge, huge distress for a lot of women and men who want to see their kids every day. And then, and it's a reason why a lot of people stay because they're worried, like, am I gonna get to spend Christmas with my kids? Or are we splitting it or every other year? So that's an example, a really good example of when you're on the other side and the divorce is final, where comes back in. Because now you're grieving the loss of, maybe you're grieving the loss of, we spent every year at a vacation home with his family. And now my kids are there with him and his family, and I'm alone.
Yeah.
Or I'm with my new partner, but
Or
I
my
still miss that. So that's why I say, like, the grief doesn't necessarily stop when the divorce is final, or even a year later when you learn to live your life differently. There are still going to be times where it creeps back up, just like grief when someone has passed or you've lost someone. So the stages of grief with divorce might look a little bit different. And it is an emotional journey, both during it and after. Just like death, people go through the different stages. But unlike death, divorce grief can be a little more cyclical. You may feel okay one day and then be hit by a wave of sadness or anger or whatever on another day. And that's ongoing. And with clients I've worked with, that surprises them because they get to a good day and they're like, oh my God, I'm finally over this. I feel amazing. I'm done. Like, I've accepted, I've moved on. And then the next day, something triggers sadness and grief or anger. And it can really come from out of nowhere. So the stages are a little bit different. Like, we have denial, where a lot of times that's heavier on one side or the other. A lot of times people hold on to hope that it'll work out. If there's infidelity, adds a whole nother layer of denial.
like betrayal trauma, that's a whole
Betrayal trauma, a whole nother thing we're going to talk about. The anger people experience can be directed at your spouse or ex-spouse, yourself, their family, if they're flying monkeys who are supporting them and hating on you, like, that can be really difficult. And then something I went through in the bargaining phase of grief, right at the end of my divorce, which was shocking to me because I wanted it and we were at the finish line. And I saw him making changes in his life that I felt he, I wanted him to do while we were married. And I was like,
it's such classic
you're
things.
doing all the things that I asked you to do. And so I went through this really extreme, I would say, day or two, so close to being done, of what if? Like, what if it would work? What if we could get along? If he's going to do X, Y, and Z now, then maybe I could be happy. Maybe we could work. Maybe you would. And then there's, what if I would have waited a little bit longer? What if he would have agreed to go to counseling? Could that have worked? So there is a whole bunch of bargaining going on. For me, that ended when the divorce was finalized immediately. It was like a flip switch, and I never went back to bargaining. But people do. And I have clients who go through that where they specifically will see their ex spouse with someone else. And what they see is their spouse being the spouse they wanted them to be with them.
This is so classic, and I hear this all the time. It's like, man, he's doing all the things.
Yes.
He's doing all the things for years that I wanted them to do.
Yep.
Like now they're being this person that's who I wanted.
It's who I wanted. Or it's who he was in the beginning. And that's the person. That's why people stay
And
for so long. Like, I want that guy that I
yeah,
had at the beginning. He may be starting a new beginning with someone else. So, of course, he's going to be that guy again. And so that can really trigger a lot of bargaining. Maybe he is the guy again. Oh my gosh, like he's back. And then that can then trigger anger again. Like a lot of anger. I see a lot of people flip flopping when there is, especially another person introduced, especially if one spouse has started over with a new person before the other one. Then there's anger, there's bargaining. And this can be a year after the divorce is over because that triggers so much emotion. And seeing your ex spouse acting and behaving in a way you always wanted them to go back to because that was the person you fell in love with. That can be really traumatic and difficult. And I think that is a time we're going to talk about how to get through stuff, but that's a really good time to revisit what your relationship with that person was really like. Because we can easily slip into a fantasy world and only remember the good things and stop. And that can trigger really intense sadness, so the depression phase. Many people have already gone through depression phase during or after the divorce. For me, there was a lot of more anxiety than depression because I had a lot of fear about the future and less sadness about the past. But then most people, everyone gets to an acceptance phase, right? If you allow yourself to go through anger, bargaining, depression, if you allow it, just like in the loss of a person, you will eventually get to acceptance where you begin to accept life is different and it's time to rebuild. And now I get to restart and build the life that I want and the life that works for me. But that's a road, that's a path.
journey, man.
It's a journey. And you might go through, like we said, like some of these things and think, okay, I'm on the other side of this. And then you go back. I think with my divorce, I went through my grieving phases during the divorce process. And because I had an amazing therapist supporting me through that and doing EMDR with her, like we were doing all the things and I was meditating and I was really focused on my own healing. I didn't date during the divorce at all. It wasn't even an option for me because I knew I needed an intense amount of healing and that I needed to go through the grieving process. Now, I do remember when she said, "You're grieving this and it's okay." I was like, I want it out. I want it. I remember when we sold our home, we did it during the divorce process. I didn't want to live there anymore. It was too much for me. It overwhelmed me. I thought I had no emotional attachment to that house, which is silly
Yeah.
because I put everything into it. We built it. And my kids up there and we made incredible memories there and it was beautiful. And the last day being there when it sold, getting it ready for the final walkthrough, just gut wrenching. And the bargaining and the anger and some depression and anxiety like all kicked in. I did some things to support that. Like I had my friend Ashley come and we did a tea ceremony to wish the house well and send it on its way. And that helped me. It was very soothing and therapeutic, but I still had to go through that stuff. Everyone's experience with divorce is different. But I do know for me, there were many surprising times when I thought, why don't like I'm supposed to feel better? And because I did allow myself to really sink into those emotions and allow it. And when people would say, "You're better off," or "This is what you wanted," I, thank goodness, had an incredible support system in place. I remember going to a book club one night and just sitting at the table and crying. And my wonderful friend didn't bat an eye. Like, they were just there. They just held space. I don't know if we talked about the book. I had never done that. I'm like, I don't think I've ever cried in public, but I let myself. And so when the divorce was finalized, I often say there was like a switch that flipped in. And I was like, okay, done. And hope and joy were at the forefront and loving myself. And I did allow myself to really grieve. And I took all the time during the divorce process to just be with myself and heal myself. So, I don't know where things led from.
What do you think in that whole healing and trying to allow yourself, what do you think was what worked best? Was it the crying in public? Was it the friends? Was it the professional, the EMDR? Or what do you think would be maybe like a first step for someone who's just completely new to this, is just overwhelmed with all the losses and griefs and things felt from this divorce? What would be like a starting point?
Yeah. I think I could never have gotten through it without a therapist.
Mm.
I don't think anyone should even try. I would have backed out. And I had a therapist. I was in mindfulness based stress reduction group, which was also instrumental in helping me get quiet and process the way that I needed to. And I had therapy leading up to the divorce, a lot of therapy leading up to it to get me. I knew that I needed to be as mentally strong as I could before it started. I didn't know when it was going to happen. The leaving process for me was abrupt because of a situation where we had to leave our home to have some construction done anyway. So that just opened a door for me.
But you had already in your mind been leading towards, I want a divorce.
Yeah, and there had been many discussions
Oh,
where
so he was aware too. It wasn't like something
he
where,
was, but he wasn't on board with it. Like, he wanted to make it work and he thought so. I think from his perspective, he would say he was blindsided. However, there had been many discussions of this isn't working and neither of us are really happy. So how do we do this? We were just completely disconnected and really living two separate lives.
like roommates at this point.
Not even because of his work taking him away so much. At the end, we were seeing each other once a month. So he even had another place. He was living closer to where he worked. I think the preparation question is really important. My foundation was cracked from the get, from childhood, from my own past and my own trauma from before him. I built a home, I built a structure with a cracked foundation, and I built it the best I could. And then there were lots of flaws in that home that were created as I grew. So during that divorce process and during all of that intense therapy, I had to tear the house down and then
Work on that foundation.
fix the foundation. I did that before I left.
Wow. Okay.
During the process, the people who entered my life and who were my support system, therapists and friends and family, helped me get the scaffolding up. That scaffolding they provided allowed me to rebuild. And that's an ongoing process. It doesn't stop. It never stops. We were always rebuilding and tweaking. Yeah. But the foundation needed to be laid. I needed to love myself and feel strong and trust myself because there were times when I had to make decisions in that process that other people did not agree with. And there was pushback from people in my life. I
Hmm.
had to be strong and I had to trust myself enough to know I've got me. So the scaffolding's there, the people are in place, the therapist was there, the support system had been built. And I knew I needed to do that before I left because I knew myself. I was like, I'll back down. I'll stay. I had stayed
That
over and over for many years. To answer your question about what would I say to someone who's thinking about leaving, what do they need to have in place? They need to work on their own foundation. It does not need to be perfect, but they need to start building the scaffolding, not the structure, but the scaffolding. And the scaffolding is the people in your life who are going to support you and hold you up because there are days when you are going to fall to the ground. There are days when you're going to melt, when you are going to feel so angry, so lost. You're going to question your decisions, and you need to have the right people there to love you unconditionally and hold you up and support you no matter what. And a therapist is such a great part of that, right? It's a necessity in my mind because I couldn't have done it without my therapist, my spiritual coach. And I remember her saying one time, I was sobbing and did I do the wrong thing? It was in the end when I was questioning everything and bargaining. And she said, you're awake now. There's no going back, like that part of you. So, what she was saying without getting all the spiritual terms in was you fixed your foundation. You are in a different place now. Once the foundation is fixed, that will never be cracked again. That part of your healing journey is over and you can't go backwards. And that was so powerful for me because so much of the grieving process and the self-doubt was worrying I would go back or I would repeat the same type of relationship. And so she was part of the scaffolding. She was part of what was holding me up. And while I was going through that process and I was processing and grieving and letting myself feel everything, I was building the structure of me and building it stronger and wiser and more authentic and slowly letting go of more and more people, more and more situations, more and more beliefs about myself that were false. Because ultimately, we believe we can't go on. We believe we can't do it alone. We believe we will be alone forever and we don't want to be alone forever. But once you start rebuilding your structure solid with the scaffolding and the people in place to support you, you realize I want someone in my life. I want a relationship, but I don't need it anymore because I've got me and my
how
foundation is solid.
say how would you say if someone is in that moment and they know that this isn't working, but they're almost trying to convince themselves daily for the kids or whatever, we're old and I don't want to start over or whatever, but they also know I'm completely dissatisfied here. And they're listening right now and they're just like, what do I sit and make like a pros and cons list? Do I just seek a therapist and have them convince me as they try to convince themselves to stay? What would you say would be the one thing you wish you would have heard in that moment that maybe somebody might need to hear right now that's, yeah, but whatever. Might as well stay. Been here for all these years.
So I think that it helps to talk to people who've been through it. Mm. I call them expanders. People who've been through it and are now living a better life than what you define as better, right? They're happier, they're living in joy, maybe they have a better relationship. Talking to those people and getting their perspective is really powerful. that also really helped me. I had 2 women in my life who said, "Don't wait," because so many women in particular wait, and men, like, they wanna wait till their kids finish school, get the kids right, and both of those people said, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid that this is better for your kids to stay." You're modeling a relationship for them that's not working. Is that what you want for them? Or do you want them to feel like they will be okay if they exit something that's not working, a job, a relationship, whatever? And that was really powerful for me. Both of those women did wait and they said they wish they could go back and talk to my younger self. And there was a point in time when I knew 100% that things weren't working, and it was years ago, and I would have left them. So that was helpful for me. I think I would tell people to look for the support system, but also talk to people who've been through it because it really does help to hear people's stories. I think storytelling is extremely powerful in whatever process we're going through. I kind of want to talk about what not to say to people, though.
Before we move on, don't do your kids any favors because when your kids become adults, God willing, they will, they're going to be like, why did y'all stay together? That was just a traumatic experience as a child for me to see the verbal, physical, whatever abuse, whatever the situation is. So I believe you brought up a really good point. So just to put it out there, this is something I always tell folks, don't do your kids any favors. Those individuals that say, I'm staying for the kids, I'm staying for the kids, I'm staying for the kid, those kids become adults. And what we find out later in life, as we know through our education, is that those kids then end up growing with different attachment styles that are really not beneficial to their current romantic relationships, or they're seeing romance in a different light because of the verbal, physical, whatever abuse they saw in their parents, in their home, whatever the home dynamic was. So don't do your kids any favors. That's the one thing. And also the other thing is what Leslie said is talk to someone that's been there. Talk to someone that's been through a divorce. One thing that I would say to a person that's in that position where I don't know, should I divorce, should I not? I'm not saying do a pros and cons list, but I will say ask yourself this question. And it's going to sound weird and hippy dippy or whatever, but ask yourself this question. If someone was to ask you, who are you? Who are you? What would you say? And if your definition of your identity is wife, mother, beautiful, great, wonderful, who are you besides that?
Right.
Because what that's going to do, it's going to remind you of your identity. And maybe some parts of that was lost in this unhealthy relationship where you don't even know who you are anymore.
Right.
Once we realize we can't answer that question, we might have to backtrack and start working on the foundation that you spoke about. I would just ask yourself that question and jot it down. Who am I? And then if you can't find out who you are, okay, who do I want to be?
Right.
I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to go back to school. I want to go back to swimming like I used to or playing golf, or I want to be that. Man, I was a gym rat before all this. What happened to me going to the gym? Or I want to be this. I want to be that. I want to be this. I want to be known as this, blah, 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 whatever your descriptive words are. And then the next thing in the column is how do I get there? What do I need to do? And lastly, what you want to do when you look at all that is you're going to say, is staying in this marriage going to lead me towards this? Or is it just pulling me further away from who I am? And if so, that's when you might want to take the next step. Talk to a friend that's been divorced. From there, try to seek a professional, try to set the foundation. Because we want to know, we want to make sure now that we know that there is such a thing as anticipatory grief, let's prepare for that. Let's prepare and see what we can do to be a little more proactive versus reactive once the whole house falls apart.
One more question I would ask would be, does this person support the person I want to be? Do we have a shared vision, or at least do we support each other's vision of we want to be? Because if I want a career and I want to be podcasting and I want to be a therapist and I want that to be an important piece of my life. And I've married someone who wants an incredible career of their own that's going to take them away, that's going to be impossible to support these two careers. If I want an incredible career and I want to be a therapist and I want to write a book and I want to be an amazing mom and have great family adventures and I want a marriage where there's intimacy and I see my person every night. And at the end of the day, they're there with me to go over our day and support one another. And the other person wants to travel for work, work themselves to death, and therefore can't do adventures, can't be the person next to me when I go to bed every night, can't help me parent because what they want, not there's nothing wrong with what they want, but
Right.
it contradicts what I want and it can't work together. So the question is, can this person and I together create the life that we both want? Are we on the same page?
And we support each other. And keep in mind when doing the can we support each other, like you have to make it about me. Like I can't say, can we support each other? No, I can't support him because he doesn't even know how to listen or communicate. Well, make it about I. Like, no, we can't support each other because I feel that I'm not being heard. I feel that I can't talk to that person because I'm scared every time I talk to that person, they get upset with me. So make it an I thing because what I notice as well in a lot of divorces, because I've dealt with a lot of folks that have gone through divorces and have then just lived off of that divorce. I'm this way because that divorce ruined me back in 98. When he divorced me, he ruined my life. And that's why I drink, or that's why I this, or that's why I don't love people anymore. I don't believe it. They hang on that as if this is my card and I get to use this card for the rest of my life for all my mistakes. So that's why we want to make it I statements because you have choice. Whether
Right.
you want to get out of that marriage or you want to stay in that marriage, at the end of the day, you have choice. Is it going to be hard? Yes, choose your heart. Choose your heart to stay in an unloving marriage or choose your heart to leave an unloving marriage. Either way, it's going to be hard. So choose your heart, but make sure that it's your decision because it is. And so
It's
when I
going to be hard and it's going to require you to grieve.
it's gonna be a grief because it's a loss.
Nobody walks into the marriage thinking that we aren't going to support each other and that
Right.
we aren't going to be able, everyone enters thinking we are going to each support the other person's journey and whatever they want to be.
The goal
Whatever
is
they
for it
want
to last and
to
to
be.
grow together, but
Right.
we grow apart sometimes. Things happen.
Things
People
change.
here don't the mindset changes. I don't have the same mindset that 25-year-old Bev had. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, it's different. And you have to come to terms with the fact that this is going to be a difficult process and a journey, but there are ways and there are people that have survived it. When I think about something that I want to do and I'm like, man, I can't do that. There's so many people that have done that. I can do it. You can do it. Now, is it going to be hard? Like I said, choose your heart. And another thing that I always tell folks, and I know that this is going to be even more difficult than maybe even the grieving, is leaving with love. Because
Mm,
if you don't leave with love, you never leave them at all.
yeah.
So,
It makes a big
when
difference. And especially if there are kids involved. There are difficult people that some people just can't co parent with. But if you can leave in the most peaceful way, 'cause during the process, there's so much negotiation that becomes really difficult. It becomes difficult to look at the person and love them because you're negotiating a contract ending.
especially
Right.
before
Like,
what the reason of the divorce is, because we talked about betrayal trauma and all the other things. It's going to be hard to even want to look at that person and create a contract out of things.
maybe, but when it's over, when the papers are being signed, if you can let go, okay, we've negotiated, it's over. Now we
Fine.
need to co parent if there are children, or we need to part ways. And if we can do that as lovingly as possible.
Like yes.
So I want to make sure we touch on things not to say in regards to this, because these are 100% the things that people say. Like 100%
Yeah.
saying you're better off without him. Okay, most people or her, most people know I'm gonna be better off. Doesn't mean it's what you wanna hear when you're hurting. There may be times when that is true and that you believe that. It doesn't ease someone's pain. And if your goal is to ease their pain while they're grieving and while they're struggling, that doesn't help. Like, I definitely had people say, you should have done this a long time ago. Or, thank God you're not wasting any more time. Telling someone they stayed too long, reminding someone that they were unhappy for a long period of time. It's unnecessary because
Yeah.
you're already grieving the time that you might perceive as being lost. And we don't want to make people think that the whole marriage was meaningless. Like children were created, possibly, not in every marriage, but in some. Memories were made. And in the beginning, you wouldn't have married the person if you didn't think that this was your person. So it doesn't help.
It's judging. Oh, this should
It
work.
makes people feel
Should have left.
judged.
You
And
should have left a
I
long
can
time.
tell you that part of what you need is to trust yourself. And so to have someone say, "You could have done it a long
Get out of
time
there.
ago," that's not helping you trust yourself,
Yeah.
making you doubt yourself. And it's also making you think any beliefs you might have. I am stupid. I am not worthy. Like,
Not
I
worthy of love. I can't lie.
can't trust my decision making. Like,
I
that's not
sure
what
know how to
people need.
pick them as it comes to yeah.
What people need is, I'm so happy for you. Even I'm so proud of you for getting through this. I know this was hard. Not
You'll
you should
find
be
someone new.
you should be happy you're free now. Now, for people who didn't want it, like that's really a really terrible thing to say to them. They're not happy that they're free. They want to be with that person, or maybe there was infidelity and they had to go. No, don't. You should
And
be happy. Don't
I
should anybody.
no, the should comes off very judgy. And I also want to mention for those individuals that have gone through a divorce and have somebody saying the what not to say things like, oh, you should, Leslie, you should have been out of there, or at least you're free now, or you'll meet somebody new. I want for those individuals, those messages, if you can, and not defensively, but unless we educate each other, man, we're going to keep saying this stuff to folks. So I would say advocate for yourself. Advocate for yourself ever so gently and say, you know what, Leslie, I know you're trying to help me by saying that, but it's actually honestly, it feels judgmental and it's hurtful.
Yeah,
I would rather you just say to me, Bev, I'm here for you. I know this is hard. I'm here for you. This is gonna be hard.
here for you.
What can I do for you?
And like you said in the podcast about grief over losing, when we were talking about losing someone, you're going to be okay. And it's okay that you're feeling all these really mixed emotions and having good days and bad days. And it's okay. You're okay.
Instead of saying, "Oh, you'll meet someone new," as if that's the most important thing in my life right now, you could say something like, "There's no rushing. There's no rushing to healing. There's no rushing to immediately whatever the thing is. There's just no rushing anything in your healing moment right now." And it's these very simple terms. So when you go to say something to someone, think about it first in your head. You're like, man, she should have left him a long time ago. It's like, well, let me not say that. Let me instead say, I'm here for you. I know this has been a long journey for you. I'm here for you.
I'm here for you. And I understand this is really hard. Wow, you've gone through a lot. Those are the things to say, especially when people are feeling really bad.
Yeah.
Not, it's been 6 months. It's time to move on.
Don't do that. And make sure that, the folks that are listening, advocate for yourself. Let that person know that wasn't probably the best way to approach your situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think advocating for yourself is really important. It may make someone uncomfortable. There was a point in which I had to say to someone when I was at that finish line point and I was really doubting. and I felt desperate and scared. I was so scared. How am I going to survive? What am I going to do? And someone raised their voice at me and said, "Oh my God, like and they gave me the laundry list of reasons why I was doing the right thing and I should leave." And it was in their defense, they did it because they were desperate for me to not go back. But in that moment, I was, all I really needed was to say, I know this doesn't make any sense. This is how I'm feeling, and this is hard. And I just needed that. I needed to just be heard and trusted, heard and trusted, like that I was okay. I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to change my mind, but that I needed someone to just hold space for me. I know this isn't rational. I know this is fear. I know I'm going to get to the finish line, but this is how I'm feeling. And the person reacted out of fear for me. Yeah. And so the intention of running through the list of reasons why I was going to be better off was a good intention. But the impact it had on me was to make me feel like that person didn't trust me. Maybe I shouldn't trust myself. Well, I wasn't making the right choices. I was being irrational, even though I already knew that. And it felt, like you said over and over again, very judgy. And that was really traumatic. So sometimes people who mean and they think that they are saying something to help us are re traumatizing us. Everyone needs something different. I am not a tough love kind of person. I don't receive tough love. It breaks me. I need love and kindness and compassion. And that comes from my complex PTSD and complex trauma from a kid. Tough love doesn't work. It works for some people. For me, I need someone to believe in me.
Same.
I need someone to believe, Leslie, you are rock solid and you are making the right choices and you've got this.
Yes. Spare me the tough love.
And
Spare
if
me.
you want to cry today and you want to grieve this, I trust you're still going to get to the finish line. I trust you're still going to do the right thing for you. And I honor and respect that you need to feel what you're feeling today. And I'm here for it. That's what I need. And I think that's what most people need.
And I think it could just be so simple as just asking a question. Do you want to talk about it?
Yep.
And following that up, look, you want me to just listen or do you want my advice?
Yeah.
So that going in, that person's like, look, Bev, I just need you to listen. But yes, I do want to talk about it, but please just listen. I don't want to hear your advice. I don't want to hear your
And
list.
we
I
had
hear that.
conversations, Rex, said that before too. We're friends.
Let's
I
really
don't want you to give me advice
and I'll be like, I'm here to just listen.
because I know your advice is going
Yes.
to be different than what I'm going to do. I need
Yeah.
to jump on you because I need to do that,
Sure.
but I can't take advice. And I will say, I'm going to flip this a little bit for the person who's going through the divorce, everyone is saying the same stuff. Okay. They're saying you're better off without him. At least you didn't waste more time. You should be happy. This is one of the most uncomfortable things for people to talk to you about. Just like when someone dies and no one wants to bring it up, but you need to. When you are going through a divorce, people become uncomfortable very quickly and they don't know what to say.
Right.
So, for the person going through it, it is more productive when people say these really hurtful, offensive things to process it and understand it's their discomfort. They don't know what to say. Maybe they've never gone through it. We want to be met with kindness and compassion as a person going through the divorce. We also want to be giving that back to the people who mean it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we need to keep going back for more if they're saying hurtful things, but it means they didn't know what to say.
understand that they don't know what to say, and that's all right because
Not about you. They do
it's an
trust you.
awkward conversation.
It's an awkward conversation. I can't even tell you the number of times I've said I got divorced, especially in the first year, and people would say, "I'm sorry." And I'd be like, "No, it's really been a positive thing." And they're like, "Oh, then great." But you can see a shift in their body when you say, "Oh, I just went through divorce." Immediate discomfort. Oh my
Yes.
God. I don't know what to say. I don't know the story. I don't know where she's at. So that person who said those things to me and it really hurt me, they didn't know. They were afraid that I was going to change my mind and they knew I needed this. They meant well. I did have to set a boundary. I needed to protect myself from that happening again. I did take it to my therapist and we worked through it. But having compassion and kindness all the way around is really much easier. People are doing their best on
Yes.
all sides. So if someone says something to you that is hurtful, learning to let that flow and bounce off.
Yeah.
And then if it really digs at you, then maybe for me, that was a really good thing to process with my therapist and say, why did it hurt so bad? What was it bringing up in me? Do I have self doubt? Was there an old version of me that would have listened to them and felt poorly about myself or felt shame? Did I feel shame because they were saying? So take it as an opportunity to dig a little deeper in yourself and start building your structure around the way it made you feel. But
Which is all amazing points because just like we want to advocate for ourselves, we also want to be aware that these people aren't trying to hurt us. Especially if you're telling them about your divorce, probably because you have a relationship with them of some
yeah,
sort. We're not just going around telling strangers. So they're all people that you know you can trust in telling this to and you feel comfortable having this conversation with. So we knowingly know they're not, oh, you should have been left them. That's coming from a place of love, from a place of protecting me or the person. And so understanding that too, understanding everybody's just, it's an awkward conversation. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to receive or give it. But that's why this podcast exists. And we also want to discuss some of the things that you can do to cope with the divorce finally in the end. I know one of the things Leslie has mentioned on several times already, seek professional support. That's one of the main things that is discussed as far as divorce and how to cope. Seeking professional support and allowing yourself to grieve, which we already discussed.
yeah,
And one of the things that I had mentioned was redefining your identity. If you got lost in that marriage somewhere, redefining that identity, that comes with either you can tackle that on your own, but you are probably very much more supported doing that with a professional.
yeah. And I think even creating a vision board. What do I want my life to look like a year from now? My life coach said to me multiple times, but if you could be living your life anyway,
Mm,
and 5 years, what would life look like? When I started working with her, I didn't know.
really?
I didn't. But then as my foundation was laid and created the scaffolding and support people, I felt safe to say, "Oh, this is what I want my life to look like." And that whole start the whole other conversation about me learning to manifest things. But I'm a really good manifester. When I say I want something, like I'm really good at it. I wasn't before because I didn't have clarity and I didn't have peace and I didn't have a structure or a foundation. Now that I do, I want this to happen or I want
That
that.
helps you like find meaning in your next chapter, which
Correct.
is we also need.
So have fun with redefining. If you're in the grieving process, that's going to be difficult at times, but start thinking about what you want your life to look like. And if you have the therapist and the support and your healing, you will start manifesting. So have fun defining who you are now and who you want to be and get creative and bold and big if that feels good. And establishing new routines plays into that and the self-care, like focusing on self-care. What do you need? Start small if you need to, jump in and go full throttle if you need to, get a trainer, whatever is going to do to get your body moving, eating. I can't stress enough how important putting good things into your body and mind are during this process.
Yes, what you watch, what you listen, the gossip, the this, the that,
Whole
whole thing.
because everything you ingest
Mm.
mentally and physically plays a role in how easy the grieving process is and how you engage. And specifically with breakups and divorce, I do think limiting contact in most cases. There are situations where people uncouple and they maintain a really great friendship, and that's wonderful. But if you're in a situation where it's not great, limiting contact, especially during the process and for the time after, can be really helpful in moving on.
Al
And
I also too, I would say if someone was to ask you, you're in your the divorce is final, you signed. Someone's asking, "So now what do you want?" As far as it pertains to this divorce and that previous relationship, you're like, "I don't know." No contact. Because what's gonna end up happening if you're like, "Well, I miss him or miss her. I wanna see her. I wanna see him. I still wanna hang out with them. I still wanna share mutual funds and banks and this." All that's gonna do is just this lingering, just
prolong.
prolonging this thing. We gotta somehow rip that
Yeah,
unfortunate Band-Aid off so that no contact might be necessary. If you don't know what you want, it's best to leave that person alone instead of dragging them along in your confusion. Because if that person was still vulnerable to the relationship or still wanted to it to work, they're gonna still come over or they're gonna still have a relationship with you.
there is, you have to have some level of
Sure, some
and
contact.
I will say from my experience, our contact for the first probably year really did stem around the kids, and we limited it to that, and that really helped both of us move on in a way that now, like, we do really well co-parenting, which I wasn't sure if that would and but we do, and we are very friendly now.
Yeah.
But I think that having that period of time where we really limited contact to only things with the kids has helped us get to the point now where we're very comfortable around one another. We have kids together. We're going to be around each other for the rest of our lives. But while you're really in the thick of it,
Yeah.
getting contact because the person's nice to you and that starts that whole bargaining process over again. And you're like, oh, they're being so nice. And look at us. We're such good friends. Maybe it could have worked. Just so limiting is better and focusing on yourself and focusing on redefining and figuring out what your next chapter is a much better use of your time.
So when we say no contact, we're definitely talking about if you're in the thick of it, but we're also talking about no contact that isn't related to specific things that you guys need to settle, whether it's the kids or the financials. It's these basic things and keeping it focused around that as to not confuse things any further.
All right. I just want to say what we're talking about applies to relationships where there is no abuse. So if it's an abusive relationship, there's a whole
Different level of no
it
contact.
that we're not gonna go into right now, but and there's trauma bonds to talk about and a whole bunch of other things that get people to go back and forth. It's
Yeah.
another podcast episode. We're talking about if you're going through a divorce right now, just know that your grief is valid if you've recently gone through a divorce. It's not only valid, it's necessary. What we have to go through to get to the other side and the awakening. And it's okay to mourn it. It's okay to mourn the life you once had, the security, whatever it is, your home, material things, people, all of it. It's okay to mourn it. And there's no shame in like feeling sad or lost or even longing for something from the relationship that you miss. That's all normal, healthy processing. So I just want to say thanks to Bev
Yeah.
for this long conversation, but I think that there were such great tidbits in here for people. you're listening and you know somebody who's going through a divorce and maybe they're struggling, I think that this could be helpful for them. So please share the episode. And I guess thanks for listening. And
Yes. Thank you guys. And thank you, Leslie, for having me. And thank you for sharing so vulnerably your experience, your lived experience, and of course, your knowledge as always. I do have one question. First off, I want to say, guys, keep in mind if you don't leave in love, you never leave at all. And that goes for anything that you leave. And it's okay to grieve. It's going to look different, but we all have that human experience of loss and grieving. And we know what that feels like. Go through it, get the help, listen to us, ask us any questions. You guys know where to follow us. Make sure you follow and subscribe as well to our YouTubes and follow us on Instagram as well. I have one last question for Leslie. Leslie, someone who's been married, years, kids, divorced. Would you get married again?
I don't plan to. I don't ever say never because I feel the minute you say never, you basically sign up for whatever it is you said never to. I don't feel like it's necessary for me personally. I don't need that contract. And it was such a messy process here in the US. It's such a messy process to get out of it. So I feel like I will be in a long term committed partnership with another human being and that will be enough for me. But everyone's different. And I think culture and religion and children all play a role. I don't plan on having I can't have any more children.
So
My
do you like
between
the contractual awkwardness of the how things are here? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. That's not your jam. But you are willing to fall in love again.
oh, no, absolutely. I just don't need the contract. I think it plays a role in keeping people together. And what I've learned in my relationship now is that when there are contractual or facial non-relationship reasons for people to stay together, it forces you to work through things that you may not, one person may not have worked through in the past. I don't personally need the contract, but I do think it does serve a purpose and it fills a need for security that some people have. So for me personally, I
Mhm.
don't think I will ever be married again. Maybe get engaged if it makes the other person feel good. If I met
There's this major divorce lawyer, and he said there's more divorces in our nation than there are marriages. However, what he notices is that out of all the people that he has divorced, a very high percentage would do it again. They would go for either marriage or they would go for love again. So
oh,
the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, even when we go through the hurts of a breakup and the grief and hurt of a divorce, what we know as far as our human make is that we are willing to love and go through it again, knowing the potential hurt that might come from it. But we know that we would love again. So just keep that in mind. Keep your loving hearts full. Keep loving the way you love. And thank you again, Leslie.
all of the relationships, marriages, whatever we've had lead up to another relationship. So in my current relationship, I think that I am in it and I am where I am and I am happy and grateful and fulfilled in it because of all of the relationships I've had in the past, including my past marriage. So I would never trade that in. Every person prior to your person helped you get there and appreciate it.
Absolutely. And as for me, I've never been married and I would gladly do it. Once. Like,
Amen.
probably the once. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, guys.